Hi everybody, I'm Brent Stafford and this is RegWatch by RegulatorWatch.com. We're here in Warsaw, Poland for the 12th edition of the Global Forum on Nicotine, the annual conference on safer nicotine products and tobacco harm reduction. Joining me today for this episode is Bill Wirtz, Senior Policy Analyst at the Consumer Choice Center and one of Europe's most active voices pushing back against the rising tide of lifestyle regulation. From tobacco harm reduction to alcohol, sugar, gambling, and beyond, Bill's been challenging the new prohibitionists head on. So we've just recently met, and it's fascinating what you do. You work for the Consumer Choice Center. Tell us about that.
The Consumer Choice Center is a global consumer advocacy group, and we argue for more consumer choice, evidence-based policy making, and innovation. So what that means in practice is that consumers should have the choice. Responsible consumers can make their own choices, whether it's how they want to get from A to B, how they pay for services, with what they pay for services, what they consume, what they eat, where that food or those services come from. So it's also about trade. And our approach is that responsible consumers need to choose winners and losers on the marketplace, not government.
So I've got written down here that you're one of Europe's most active voices pushing back against the rising tide of lifestyle regulation. What is lifestyle regulation?
So lifestyle regulation is everything to do with how you have fun often, but it can also be about how you express yourself. But often, we relate this to how people have fun, and that this often has to do with vices. So whether it is smoking, drinking, gambling, just going to parties, and what time is the party supposed to end? So we have a lot of those kind of regulations surrounding that, and the government approaches this from the perspective of we're just protecting you. We're trying to keep it on the down low, that so that you don't overdo it. But this is very paternalistic, and our approach is always that most lifestyle regulation actually doesn't make sense. There's a few that might make sense, but most of the time it doesn't.
So nicotine is a part of that now, isn't it?
Absolutely. We really shifted the conversation on nicotine actually in global sort of policy making, because it used to be all about cigarettes and how cigarettes hurt people. But governments have shifted away from that because they now make it about nicotine because the pervasive argument is that nicotine is the actual problem, which we know it is not. Nicotine doesn't cause cancer. Nicotine is not the problem here. People may get addicted to nicotine, but it's about the delivery system that actually causes health problems. So when the government wanted to crack down on cigarettes, it used its usual tools. You can't smoke on bus stops. We're increasing the price. You can't smoke in bars, all of these rules. And then came along vaping, which was actually a technological innovation that helped people quit smoking very effectively. And the government has, for several reasons, crack down on vaping as well. One might say there's a diminishing tax revenue that is associated with it. There's a couple of reasons there that we might be able to get into, but yeah, we really see this demonization of vaping, which is one of the choices that consumers do make.
So you are a regular voice on some pretty major network television and cable channels, one of them being Fox News in the US. Tell us about how you ended up on Fox and what are some of the things that they ask you about?
Well, we have a wonderful media booker called Stephen Kent who does a very good job on getting us on all types of networks because we are non-partisan. So, and we really just talk about the issues, so we can be on different networks no matter how they are editorialized. And it's quite a surreal experience because I'd done live TV before, but Fox is on a very different speed. And the first time they had booked me, they told me it was going to be a split screen with two other people, and I was maybe going to get 20 seconds in. Turns out two people dropped out, and I had 4 full minutes on the morning show on Fox and Friends on the weekend. And at first they book you and they tell you what they want to talk about, but then that's the first 30 seconds. And the next questions are whatever the host wants to ask you about. So you really have to be prepared for that type of thing. My background's in media, I feel very well prepared, but there's still these instances of how am I gonna deal with that? So it's been a very cool experience, and people give a lot of feedback. People that like the segments and the people that don't like the segments. So my message requests on different social media platforms have been a bit of a hellhole.
So this episode of RegWatch, is targeting our U.S. audience, and be very interested to hear what you think of the war on vaping in the U.S.
So in the US, it's a phenomenally complicated regulatory system, because the FDA is supposed to approve new products, but then it does so either very slowly or not at all. And I think that's going to be even more difficult now that there have been quite some cuts in sort of the staffing within FDA. So the American system would be perfect in order to get people out of smoking if it was geared towards harm reduction. But it doesn't actually do that. You have significant amounts of people that still smoke cigarettes. And for instance, the last administration tried to address that by banning flavored cigarettes, menthol cigarettes, for instance. Trying to say, well, there's a specific minority group, black people in the US, that smoke a lot of menthol cigarettes, so we're just going to ban it because that is a minority group that we're trying to protect. Well, not only was that not legal, it also wasn't conducive to a healthy debate or a healthy outcome, because there's still an illicit market that will sell those anyway. And, well, if you want something with menthol in it, there's a lot of vapes that have menthol, and even the governments that restrict flavors still allow menthol on the market. So there is already a solution. I think it's a bit beyond me why the US, a country so geared towards innovation, so on the forefront of innovation in so many areas, really misses the mark on that one.
When it comes to the US, is it fair to say that much of the misinformation and demonization stems from stuff coming out of the US that you have to deal with in Europe?
Yeah, so I mean, Michael Bloomberg is as a philanthropist. I mean, the man has been very successful in different endeavors that he's embarked on, but like, this is not one of the issues that he knows very well. He has made it his mission to demonize vaping, and he doesn't only fund operations and nonprofits within the United States, he does that all around the world. And he's even been successful in countries in Asia to try and make the case for restrictions on vaping. Some of those countries, and Myanmar, for instance, is one of them, where the restrictions on vaping have actually led to the government selling more cigarettes because it's a state-run monopoly. So he's active all around the world. So it's unfortunate because, in a way, a lot of the innovation on the vaping market, the devices, comes from engineers, entrepreneurs in the US that design these devices. So we're getting the export of the good product, but we're unfortunately also getting the export of the bad policy making and the bad advocacy that gets brought to Europe. And often these activists also bring the tactics that are successful from the US to Europe, the dressing up in front of parliament and the photo shoots and all of that, like protect the children, that kind of narrative that was really not as pervasive in Europe. It's like the think of the children type of response was not really a good policy making point, even on other issues in the past. But American funded and driven groups have been very successful at propagating that narrative in Europe, unfortunately.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, it's very much rooted in some historical things in the US. Early social movements around progressivism and stuff like that is really where protected children come from. It was used famously for alcohol prohibition. So to hear that it's actually been exported to Europe, that is kind of amazing.
It's really unfortunate that we've come to this point, and we now hear European lawmakers sound very much the same than American lawmakers on that issue. If you just look at sort of the conversations on the Health Committee of the European Parliament, if I showed you one of those speeches and I would ask you whether this was a congressperson or somebody in the European Parliament, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It is really geared towards a unified messaging. It's all bad, it's all the same, and it's like it's big tobacco just trying to push its products again. That is unfortunately the narrative that we have now, which the only thing that it makes it easier for us as Consumer Choice Center is that the messaging we do towards policymakers is geared in the same way no matter where we are in the world, because the misconceptions are also the same all around the world.
Bill, if you could, there's obviously, you just were touching on it, what's going on? There's Spain, there's France. Like France, what the heck's going on there?
Yeah, so I mean, the French government has actually in the past been fairly okay on vaping, because its public health agencies have said that this is a good way to quit smoking, which has actually driven down France's smoking rate to about between 15 and 20%. If you compare that to Germany, it's about a third of the population that smokes in Germany. If you watch French independent movies, you would get the opposite impression and sort of the stereotype that we have of French people. But actually the French government now wants to do more. It wants to restrict pouches, it wants to restrict all types of things, and also the flavors. So the flavor ban is really the big one that we have on the docket right now. So the Netherlands, I believe it came into effect about a year ago, banned vape flavors. There's only a few allowed flavors by the government. The argument was flavors attract children, to vaping. And so there's all these restrictions now. Of course, people can go abroad and bring it in, but ultimately, if you buy it in the Netherlands, you can't get strawberry, pineapple, any of these flavors. And the Netherlands, because it realized that people go and shop abroad or buy from abroad, wants to make this an EU law, and now pushes it with the help of France and other governments to make this an EU regulation. Very often when you have bad policy in the EU and it doesn't work for a country, what they try to do instead is double down by making it an EU-wide regulation. So we have a lot of challenges ahead.